Assalamu alaikum. This is Microeconomics Theory course directed to fourth year economics section. Let's start by solving some questions about market demand and elasticity, chapter 3 in our textbook. Question number 1. State whether the following sentences are true or false using graph when necessary. First, the price consumption curve is always upward sloping. Definitely, this sentence is false. Why? Because the shape of price consumption curve depends on the price elasticity of demand, and we have different cases. When price elasticity of demand equal 1, price consumption curve would be horizontal. When price elasticity of demand less than 1, when we have inelastic demand for good X, price consumption curve would be upward sloping, and when we have elastic demand, price consumption curve would be downward sloping. Second, the price elasticity of demand is constant along the downward sloping demand curve. This sentence is false and can be corrected in two ways. We can say that price elasticity of demand is constant along vertical demand curve or horizontal demand curve or rectangle hyperbola demand curve, while along the downward sloping demand curve, the value of price elasticity of demand varies from one point to another point. It increases as price level increases. Third, when the demand curve is linear and downward sloping, price elasticity of demand equals the slope. Also, this sentence is false. Why? Because the slope of demand curve equals the change in price over change in quantity, while the price elasticity of demand equals the inverse of the slope, which is change in quantity for X over price of X, for instance, times price over quantity of a goods. So price elasticity of demand equals the inverse of the slope times bx over q of x. Fourth, it's easy for producer to raise the total revenue from selling. All he has to do is just to raise the price. This sentence is false. Why? It depends on the price elasticity of demand. When producer face elastic demand for his product, it's more profitable to decrease the price in order to increase his total revenue. Because when we have elastic demand, this means that any change in the price would cause a great percentage change in the quant demand for goods. On the other side, when we have inelastic demand, when the producer is facing with inelastic demand for his product, it's profitable to increase the price level. Why? Because any rise in the price level would cause a reduction by small amounts in quantity consumed of the product, thereby total revenue would be increased. While when we have unitary elastic demand curve, the total revenue will not change as price changed. Fifth, when demand curve is linear and downward sloping, marginal revenue equals 0 and total revenue is at maximum when price elasticity of demand equals 1. Definitely this sentence is true. Why? As we told before, when we have unitary elastic demand curve, total revenue will not be changed as price is changed, which means that total revenue reaches its maximum. So when we have unitary elastic demand, any change in the price level will not have any impact or effect on total revenue, which means that total revenue reaches its maximum. What about marginal revenue? Marginal revenue, it is the change in total revenue resulting from a change in the quantity produced and sold by 1 unit. When total revenue reaches its maximum, So there is no change in total revenue, which is mean that marginal revenue equals 0. It's indicated by this graph. Sixth, countries aiming to benefit from currency devaluation must consider the price elasticity of demand for both exports and imports. This sentence is true. How could we explain this? First of all, we have to define what's meant by currency devaluation. Currency devaluation is an attempt to lower the price of countries' export and raise the price of its imports. Again, currency devaluation is an attempt to lower the price of countries' exports and raise the price of its imports. This policy, to be efficient or beneficial for any countries must pay attention to the price elasticity of demand for both imports and exports. Concerning exports, we have two cases. When exports are price inelastic abroad, and when the demand for our exports is price elastic abroad. Let's take the first case, when the demand for exports is price elastic abroad. In this case, any reduction in the price of exports will allow more goods to be sold abroad, leading to a rise in the revenue. While when exports are price inelastic and there is a reduction in the price, so quantity sold would increase by smaller amount, and in this case revenue will decrease. So currency devaluation would be beneficial only if the demand for export goods is price elastic abroad. Concerning imports, we have also two cases. When domestic demand for imports is price elastic, and when domestic demand for imports is price inelastic. Let's take first case. When domestic demand for imports is price elastic, then quantity of imports will decrease by larger percentage and the bill that we will have to pay would decrease. And on the other side, if the domestic demand for imports is price inelastic, then the increase in the price of imports will lead to smaller reduction in the quantity purchased, and we will have in this case to pay more for our imports. So currency devaluation would be also efficient when domestic demand for imports is price elastic. Second question, suppose the demand curve is given by the following equation: Q equals 40 minus 2P. Requirements: calculate the price elasticity of demand at price equal 2. Derive marginal revenue curves from the demand curve. What is the value of total revenue when price elasticity of demand equals 1 and at what price level? Draw total revenue, marginal revenue, and the demand curves. Try to solve this problem by yourself before going to the answers. First of all, in order to get the price elasticity of demand at price equal 2, we have to calculate the quantity at price equal 1 and to get the quantity demanded at price equal 2, and then we use the formula that price elasticity of demand equals change in quantity over change in price time all the price over all the quantity, and we'll get price elasticity of demand in this case at point B equals 2, it equals minus 0.11. How could we explain this? It means that any increase in the price of goods by 1%, quantity demand would decrease by 0.11%. Second, he asked to derive the marginal revenue curve from the demand curve, and the questions give me the demand curve as written, which is different from demand curve which is drawn. The demand curve as drawn is the inverse of the demand curve as written. It expressed as price as a function of quantity. In this case, in order to get margin revenue curve from the demand curve, we have to explain it from the demand curve as drawn. In this case, we get the demand curve as drawn, and in order to get margin revenue, it equals the change in total revenue over a change in quantity. We have first to get total revenue, we multiply price times quantity. In this case, the total revenue equals 20Q minus 0.5Q squared, and differentiate this with respect to quantity, we will get the marginal revenue curve, which equals 20 minus Q. The marginal revenue had the same intercept as the demand curve on the y-axis, but the marginal revenue has a slope twice as steep as the demand curve. Third, what is the value of total revenue when price elasticity of demand equals 1 and at what price level? Here he asked for the value of total revenue when the price elasticity of demand equals 1 and he needs the price level. As we know, when price elasticity of demand equals 1, total revenue reaches its maximum. So here he asked for the price level that maximizes total revenue and the value of maximum total revenue. How can we get this? Here the starting point is the demand curve as written, as given in these questions, and we calculate the total revenue, which is equals quantity times price. And in order to maximize total revenue and get the price level that maximizes total revenue, we have to differentiate the total revenue equation with respect to the price. Okay, here we get total revenue equation, which is equal 40b minus 2b squared. And in order to get the price level that maximizes total revenue, we have to get the first derivative of total revenue equations with respect to the price and equate it with 0. In this case, the price equals 10 and quantity equals 20, and the maximum total revenue equals price times quantity is equal to $200. The last requirement is to draw total revenue, margin revenue, and demand curves. As you know, total revenue increased when price elasticity of demand is greater than 1, which maximum when the price elasticity of demand equals 1, and decreased when we have inelastic demand. Marginal revenue, in order to draw marginal revenue, it had the same intercept as demand curve at 20 on the y-axis, but it is twice as steep as the demand curve. When total revenue reaches its maximum, marginal revenue equals 0 and the quantity demand equals 20. This is the end of this lecture. If you have any questions, please contact me. Good luck.